So my name is Clover Hogan. I'm a 22-year-old climate activist and the founder and executive director of Force of Nature. I'm here tonight with Seismic and x+why to talk in the wake of COP26 about what happened and critically what the role is of business in driving a climate change agenda.
Fantastic. So tell me about your experiences at COP26 and what you feel the outcomes will be.
Yeah, I think so much of the rhetoric around COP26 places a huge amount of pressure on this being the most critical kind of 2-week window to determine the rest of the future and the fate of humanity. And I think it's kind of a broken narrative. I think ultimately countries showed up with the commitments they were already going to make, and those commitments are a far cry from what we actually need by way of climate action. The first COP I ever went to, I was 16 years old. It was COP21 in Paris, and I went in with this really starry-eyed optimism that world leaders would come together and maybe not hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but at least act with the urgency required. And instead, I saw a total lack of leadership. I saw rampant greenwashing, tokenism of the problems, utter lack of young voices, frontline voices. And so this time around, I was much more hardened to that reality. I wasn't expecting us to solve all of the issues, but where I did find hope and resilience was in the people who were actually excluded from those kind of corridors of power. The people who are out in the streets, the people who are creating change on the front lines, and the people who have kind of taken agency back upon themselves to lead that change.
So our event tonight is about, we've called it less chat, more action. Do you feel that the actions that will come out of COP are going to stick, and are they enough?
Yeah, so based on the current commitments that have been made by world leaders, we're still on track for a 16% increase in emissions over the next 10 years. And that is when the climate science tells us that we need to reduce global greenhouse emissions by 45%. So not only is there a gap between commitments and what needs to be done, but of course commitments and action. So a lot of world leaders, a lot of decision makers in business have gotten really good at making these kind of far out commitments far enough into the future that they require no immediate action. And so from COP, I'm not super hopeful that some of those commitments will actually be met. But I do believe that with enough people power, with enough pressure being placed on those we elect into positions of power, enough pressure placed on companies, enough pressure by way of regulation, then we will see that change that is required.
Fantastic. So what I want to ask you now is what seismic change you would like to see. Our company is all about generating that seismic change. We believe business is essential to achieving that. Who do you think will achieve it? And what seismic change do you want to see?
Yeah, so I think sustainability and the climate crisis, we're still kind of talking about it in a super convenient way. We think it's a problem that we can address in the future. We think it's a problem someone else will fix. We think we can solve it through really incremental measures, like setting targets that just shift things in a really token way. And for me, seismic change is all about systemic solutions. So it's how do we look at the fact that the climate crisis is a symptom of really disconnected, broken systems? How do we look at it through the economic lens, the fact that we live in a culture that values a tree more when it's dead than when it's alive? How do we look at the fact that we can buy things on the high street for a few pounds that come at the expense of frontline lives and our environment? We need to be willing to have a conversation at a much bigger level and really within that kind of discomfort of transformation, think about the world we do want to create. The climate crisis is unlike any challenge we've ever faced as a society. And with that, it's a symptom of these really interconnected problems, and there is no shortage of problems, but there is a shortage of people kind of putting up their hands and saying, this is the problem that I want to take on, and this is the piece of the puzzle that I want to own. So for me, this problem will only be solved by people who have the courage to kind of put their hands up and say, yes, I want to put my hands in the mud. I want to be part of the solution. It's very uncertain. We don't have all of the solutions, but I'm going to show up for them anyway.
I completely agree. So last question. We are asking people tonight what their pledges are for the future. So I wanted to ask you, what's your sustainability pledge for the future?
Yeah, so I think it's really easy to feel powerless in the face of these huge, overwhelming problems. I know there are a number of days where I wake up and don't want to get out of bed because the problem seems so overwhelming and depressing and despairing. And for me, my pledge is to be willing to sit in those really difficult climate emotions, but also then have the courage to step up even when the problem seems so insurmountable. And to take that a step further, I pledge to empower other people to do just that, to really step up rather than shut down in the face of the climate crisis.